رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما. Let's start, inshallah. So we're reading the 32nd word. And so we're on page 635. And any volunteers to summarize last week's discussion? Birkan, do you want to start summarizing last week's discussion?
So the parts that I remember last week, we had a discussion about the parts that we discussed the previous week. So we kind of reiterated most of the things that we discussed. We specifically concentrated on the footnote, indeed every object which is in motion and so on. We talked about the possession. And so basically, the text is about how, so, okay, going maybe a few steps back, we've been studying La Sharika Lah, and he has no partners. And then we started studying whether this is true or not. And the way we studied as usual, looking at the universe, our lives, the things that we experience in our lives, and see whether we see the single hand of a creator or not. So that was the question. And we studied this in the form of a story, an allegorical story, in which one person represents all claims against a single creator. And he was first talking with a single, let's say, maybe atom, we can say, or a particle, the smallest thing that we can imagine. And he was claiming some partnership or ownership, a control over this particle. And then we studied how this is not possible because we said there is no such thing as a simple particle. Everything is so intermingled together. To control a single particle, you have to control the entire universe. And then the same person, which again represents any, like it's a personification of any claim that assume any control over things. He was saying that, okay, I cannot control maybe, but how about you control yourself? A particle moves, for instance, by itself. How about that? And then we studied this as well. We said, if this is the case, when we look at any movement of a particle or anything that particle becomes a part of, we will see an absolute knowledge, absolute power, absolute will in place. So we said, if you can attribute all these to a single particle, then yeah, you can assume that a particle moves itself, or exists itself, or does anything that you see that it's doing by itself. But of course, that would be an absurd assumption. And the last week we also reiterated some ideas about how particles or anything in the universe exists, moves, and does thing together with other things. So how everything is again connected to each other, and then how things become part of the bigger things. So when we talk about a knowledge, for instance, that we need to attribute a particle, we have to consider all these different perspectives as well. This is a very superficial overall summary. I apologize not giving any specific examples, but this is what I remember from that.
Jazakallah khair for the summary. I think that pretty much covers everything. For me, I think pretty much the hard and so I like if I were to squeeze everything in one sentence in the last 2 weeks, it would be the last thing in the footnote, which is that is one who does not have all the stars within his grasp, cannot have mastery over a single particle. So we basically spend the better part of the last 2 weeks just trying to establish our understanding around that. So I think we can continue reading. Oh, okay, go ahead.
And I guess the gist of that last sentence is basically that we want to look for all-encompassing knowledge in the universe, and that all-encompassing knowledge belongs to Allah. And something that really stuck with me was that example, I don't know who gave it, but about how Nursi in his hometown had these flowers that used to grow there, and he was traveling somewhere. He was exiled. Yeah, he was, I don't know, it was a different situation. He was away from his hometown, and he saw that same flower over there, and he saw that as a signature of the same God who had created that flower, who created those flowers in his hometown. And that is how we should view the world, and we should like try to find his signatures. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for your comment. And I think we continue reading. Who wants to volunteer for reading? So we can start with the second paragraph on page 636.
That's so when the representative, is that what?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll read and you stop me when you want to stop. So when the representative of those things held to be God's partners despaired of the particle, he hoped to pursue the matter with a red blood corpuscle. And coming across one, he said to it on behalf of causes and in the language of nature and philosophy, I am your master and owner. And the red corpuscle replied to him through the tongue of truth and divine wisdom, I am not alone. If you are able to own all my fellows in the army of blood whose stamp, nature as officials and order is the same, and if you have subtle wisdom and mighty power enough to own all the cells of the body in which we travel and are employed with perfect wisdom, and if you can demonstrate this to be the case, then perhaps some meaning might be found in your claim. But someone stupefied like yourself cannot be owner, with your only support being deaf nature and blind force. Indeed, you are unable to interfere in so much as an atom. For the order with which we function is so perfect that only one who sees, hears, knows, and does everything can have authority over us and saying, so be silent. My duty is so important and the order is so perfect that I have no time to answer garbled rubbish such as yours. It repelled him. Then, since he was unable to mislead it, the representative left and next came across the little house known as a cell of the body. He said to it in the language of philosophy and nature, I could not persuade the particle and red corpuscle, but perhaps you will be reasonable. Since you have been made of several substances, just like a minute house, I am able to make you. You will be my artifact and true property. The cell responded to him through the tongue of wisdom and truth, saying, I am only a minute little thing, but I have very important duties and very sensitive relations. I am connected to the body as a whole, as well as to all its cells. For example, I perform complex and faultless duties in the veins, and in regard to the arteries, the sensory and motor nerves, the powers of attraction and repulsion and procreation, and the imaginative faculty. If you have the knowledge and power to form, arrange, and employ the whole body and all its blood vessels, nerves, and faculties, and if you have comprehensive wisdom and penetrating power with which to control all the body cells which are like me as regards qualities and artistry, we are brothers. Demonstrate it. Only then can you claim to be able to make me. If you cannot, then off with you. The red corpuscles bring my food, while the white ones combat illnesses which attack me. I have work to do. Do not distract me. Anyway, an impotent, lifeless, deaf, and blind thing like you cannot in any way interfere with us, for we have such an exact, subtle, and faultless order that if the one who has authority over us was not absolutely wise, absolutely powerful, and absolutely knowing, our order would be broken and our regularity spoiled.
Jazakallah. I think we can stop there for now. Thank you, Jazakallah. And any initial thoughts, comments?
My question is, if this person in this example, he was first talked to the particle and he was not successful in, I don't know, convincing himself maybe, or convincing the particle that he had control over the particle. Is that what was going on here? Why would it be easier to go convince a cell, right? It's a more complex creature. If you don't, you can't have mastery over a smaller particle. Why would you have mastery over a larger one? Something I didn't understand.
I guess we should ask that question to biologists. Because the first claim probably was more with, in today's language, maybe physicists, like where the particle was the main topic of conversation. But then because the representative is just representing all possible potential explanations out there. So the ones who deal with particles are dealing with particles, and then that representative is just using their tongue. So it got its answer. So then the physicist side of this representative is silent, but now the biologist side says, let me give it a chance, because we have this, natural selection, chance, billions years and whatnot. So maybe we can do something within the level of cell that you were not able to do when you're talking about individual particles. The thing actually that what I was going to ask was, in practice, in our college life, for example, what does this second level that the representative is speaking to sounds like? Was this, this is a very figurative, story-like language, but it corresponds to something that we hear in our classroom. So what does this sound like when it says, going to a cell or a red blood corpuscle saying that I am your master? What does this language sound like in more technical jargon that we are more familiar with, maybe?
What are you reading lips? Maybe like Mother Nature, natural selection. It described like a small house, right? So that's why I'm thinking of like Earth or like some kind of natural structure where there's all these apparent actions and reactions happening sort of by chance on their own, apparently. So
Pharmaceuticals. I would think of vaccines. We think we have the power to I don't know, maybe develop COVID or fight against COVID. When in reality there might be other forces at play, or we understand the full nature of these things. We don't.
but just, okay, go ahead. Abdurrahman.
I think Adam soon will have the same feelings, but you know, you enter your teenage years and then I guess it continues and before that and after that, but you think I am the master of my life. I am the master of my choices or what I want to do, how I want to live my life. No one can tell me how to do that. And I'll do it however I like.
So going back to Atik's original question. What is the point of going to a cell after not being able to control the particle? So this reminds me the division of sciences, right? With every science, we have a different causal nexus, like a causal relationships. So for instance, as Yusuf said, in the world of physics, we think of certain type of causal relationships or certain type of natural laws. When you go to biology, it's another type. They don't necessarily need to be connected. The chemistry, another thing, the psychology, you don't need to know about the physics or the biology to study human behavior, right? And usually it is assumed to be easier to do, the psychological work. It goes like that, the sociology and so on. As you increase the complexity, let's say, not the increase, but to change the complexity of the system that you are studying, you are always talking about a different type of causal relationships. And controlling one doesn't necessarily mean controlling another one. So it also sounds like, when you try to control one particle, again, controlling particle, it's just a figurative thing, right? It means I can explain, like it's like, the physicists use the theory of everything. So you start with such an ambition. You say that we can explain everything, right? We don't need any God or anything. We can explain anything. We can attribute things, everything, to some natural forces and so on. That's the ambitious goal. The less ambitious one, which refer to controlling the particle, right? Because theory of everything is about explaining subatomic, starting from subatomic particles and so on. But anyway, no reason for a technical jargon. Even if you cannot do that, the less ambitious one is in explaining something bigger, like how people interact with each other. And to make such an explanation, you don't need to know what's going on in the particle level or whatever, right? So it's assumed to be, in that sense, easier. So you're just explaining that thing, not everything. So for instance, when you talk about cell, right, it means you can explain everything about the organism. If you go up and you say that, okay, I will just control Atik, it means you just controlling Atik, not the everything about Atik, right? And not every other organism as well, just Atik. So, and this is how things go in, the college or universities or in, general, the science, philosophy, and so on. So, other day I was reading about a study in which they modify some cells and they wait for like 300 generations of these bacteria. Anyway, studying the evolution and so on. And the conclusion was, even though we, cut many of the genes and left only the minimal ones, the organism was able to evolve regardless. And the conclusion was the natural selection is so powerful that it can work even with a minimal cell. Or the life finds its way. So that was the conclusions, right? The scientific quote unquote conclusions. So these the people who studied, for instance, they would also say in discussion that we don't know which parts of the genes and so on mutated and so on, or have why, but still we know that this happens. So lower level understanding not necessary to make a claim about a higher level situation. So that's what I understand from this hierarchy.
Sure.
Yeah, we can explain how people interact. Like we have this, I don't know, I'm just making up like a clash of forces, and you try to maximize your benefit, he tries to maximize his benefit. And through these explanations, you now explain the relationship between Yusuf and Atik. You would say, I don't know how it is implemented in the biological level or so on, but still I can explain this.
Yeah.
So this is what I understand.
So, like, I mean, yeah, we observed the exact same thing in physics too. Like Newton did explain everything for classical mechanics on a big scale. When we went down to the quantum levels, like none of those rules apply. So like, yeah, you don't need to understand things at a quantum level to explain at a bigger. I mean, what I found interesting is like, even though he is going to a bigger level now, but the rebuttal is sort of the same. It's like, first of all, I'm not alone. I work in unison to a lot of other things. So you need to have knowledge of all of those, plus have perfect knowledge of all the cells that I become a part of when I'm working. So it's like, because the rebuttal is the same, is there a similar underlying assumption? For example, whatever the theory is, let's just call it theory X, which is trying to explain a particle, and then a different theory, theory Y, which is trying to explain how cells work, but the rebuttal is the exact same. So is there the fault in both the assumptions is the exact same because the counter argument is the same.
So I guess one common mistake here is, and all the like cell particle of the cell, what they say is someone stupefied like yourself cannot be the owner. What does that mean? So what you are claiming to be the doer of that action, what you're so what you are claiming to be the doer of that action is a consciousless lack of knowledge, or it's just either a law or a just sequence of events which you name as something. So it is lacking knowledge, it is lacking will. So no matter what you name it, what you call it, these are the main components that's missing. And this knowledge and will also needs to be all-encompassing because of it repetitively emphasizes that the output that we get is requiring this interconnectedness. So in a sense, what it is doing is, in one way, going and speaking to the physicist, I mean, generally speaking, that this is what you're doing, same mistake, yes. And then goes back to biologists. Biologists will come up with different fancy names. Yesterday, I was in the classroom, there was CRISPR, how they change, cut and paste for genes. In a computer science classroom, this is just over the wall, they were mentioning CRISPR. So somebody mentions CRISPR and says, we know how to change DNA. So here I am, with CRISPR, I can do anything. So the author is in here is saying that, what is CRISPR? What do you mean by that? Like what is happening in here is requiring knowledge, all-encompassing knowledge because of the way that everything is related and whatnot. By just talking about something which doesn't oversee any of these, doesn't have any of the will that's required, you are claiming that it is the actor, the doer. This is what is being challenged by the author repetitively throughout the conversation that we will follow.
I guess one thing that I'm taking away from the text so far is that in terms of methodology, what's being shown to us is that in my life, when I observe a sequence of events, when I observe something happening, whether it's a red blood cell or DNA, or you can kind of replace that with whatever you'd like. I should enter into a conversation with it. I should try to witness, rather I should see what I witness out there. So if I see that there are certain qualities being exemplified, maybe, knowledge, interconnected knowledge is sort of all-encompassing knowledge, will, wisdom. When I enter into a conversation with the cell, the particle, the DNA, whatever, I should ask whether it can be the owner of those qualities. And be honest with myself as well about what it is that I do see. Because I guess because all around me, within the society, within the education that I receive, there will be constantly interpretations that are extended to me about what's happening. But beyond those interpretations, I need to see, what do I witness? And if I were to speak with this thing itself and question it, what would it say to me? Yes, that's something.
I also noticed, so I do think there are a lot of similarities with the text that we read last week. And I think something I've observed is that nature is talking to the smallest of things, so we talked about how I think Zara asked that question like a week or two ago, where you were like, oh, I know I can't control things on like a grand scale, but I can control this. And I think that's important because over here we're talking about like really minute particles, and that's where we should start our thinking from. And like atoms, red blood cells, like I think it's very important to sort of have that thinking that, like if you can't even control this really small thing, what authority do you really have? Also, like something I was thinking of when I read this, only one who sees, hears, knows, and does everything can have authority over us. And I was thinking about how so Gerard these days, he wants to buy a dog. And I asked him, why don't you just get a dog that has already been trained? Why do you want to train the dog yourself? And he said, that it's really important to sort of build a connection with the dog from that very young age when they're, a baby or whatever, a puppy or whatever. And I do think that, I do see the importance of that. And I do agree with that idea, if you are the one who is seeing the dog with the dog all the time, the dog is going to listen to you because that sort of a connection is there, that understanding is there. So I think we do observe that. And also,
Observe what? Sorry, I missed that, the connection with the dog.
we observe this in our lives also, that
What is this? I missed that.
oh, so if you want to have quote unquote authority over a dog, for example, if you live with the dog and you have a connection with the dog, you see it, hear it, what the dog wants, what its needs are. I think that also applies to your child, for example. So what her needs are. If she's sick, that, so you can have authority over her. But if you don't have that sort of a knowledge, if you don't have that understanding, you are not going to have true authority over her. Maybe you could scare somebody into doing something, but that's not true authority. And then in the last sentence where it says that if the one who has authority over us was not absolutely wise, absolutely powerful, and absolutely knowing, our order would be broken. I also thought that that was important, those three things together was important because it signified that, you do need that sort of harmony between different types of power, wisdom, knowledge. You do need that harmony there. And that sort of also alludes to the all-encompassing attributes, I guess. Yeah. I'm done.
Yes, please. Oh,
I have a question. I don't know if it ties back to Kadir or no, but here we are saying that the red blood cell or the blood of the corpuscle, it's functioning. So, but no one's like, we didn't talk about how it's functioning. For example, for the body to function, for the red blood cell to function, it needs food. And for example, we can say that food is being provided by the sustainer, but we are the ones that put that food in our mouth and like we eat it. So in turn, we could say that we are sustaining that red blood cell. Or is that not the case?
Well, I mean, I'll take a jab at it. Just to explain from using Nusi's argument is to claim that you are the sustainer, you should be aware of and also controlling all the processes that happen from you putting like a piece of food in your mouth to it transforming or being absorbed, digesting everything, and then all the way making its way to a red blood cell and then becoming part of it. Because you don't have knowledge of all the processes, you cannot be its sustainer.
I'm just saying.
Yes, please.
So one thing I, got from this text, when you say, I'm just saying this, just this. So Nursi says there's no such thing as just this. So when you say, for instance, I'm just talking about putting a food in my mouth. So we should say, okay, let's elaborate it. What you mean with putting something in your mouth? And when you study that, you will realize that the only thing you are doing is just willing. You don't even know what you are doing with your mouth, like a hand, how it raised, how it's moves and so on. All you are doing is just willing. And this is something, let's say, specific to human. So it makes things more complicated, I would say. It's not, I'm not trying to say there's no answer to that, but it is slightly, out of the context. And that's the only thing you will realize that you are doing. And by just willing to have food, if you claim that I'm sustaining my red blood cells, you are not even aware of your red blood cells. You don't even know where this food goes and how it, finds its way to red blood cells. You have no idea. So it will be very foolish as text says, like what you are claiming is a blind thing is controlling. You are a blind force in that example. So you cannot control it. You cannot be sustaining it just by willing to eat. And that's the only thing you can do.
But also, just in that sense, it sort of becomes like a chicken and egg problem because your red blood cells are working perfectly for you to be able to, your cells respiring and all that, for you to be able to put that piece of food in your mouth and stuff, just like red blood cells working fine.
So I just really wanted to comment on like what you're saying. It seems to me that we can't just stop there. So I'm hearing the conversation and I'm thinking about how a car needs gasoline. It's like saying that the pump guy at the gasoline is the provider of the gasoline or the controller, as you're saying. Like it could be the same, his responsibility is the same as the responsibility of the truck driver that brings the oil to the gas station, or that sequence of people that bring the oil to your car. Like they're all in control then. It's not just you. I just wanted to add that.
It's also like if you think about like how do you know you're supposed to eat? And if you really think
That's
about
a
the answer,
question. How do you know not to eat?
wait. And if you think about the answer to your question, you would probably arrive at, we just do, or it's intuitive, or it's just inherent in us. And that is what Nursi is sort of like countering, like don't just accept ideas, don't just see things as you see them, really question them, like where is this coming from? Is this knowledge just there, or is somebody giving me this knowledge every second?
No, that is not my question. I said you get the food. Food is from Allah. Like food is at your table. You're not in control of getting the food there. You're not in control of anything that goes inside your body. You're in control of putting that food in your mouth. You have that control. And if you have that much control, I think you can have like.
So what do you want credit for? The choice, like we talked about today?
Control, no credit. Just
You made the
control.
right choice and you want somebody to like pat your back for it?
No, just say that I'm in control. Like if I don't want to
Let's
eat it, then
let's reel it in for the Yusuf as a comment. That's -10.
Okay, so I think this is like such a question is really taking us out of where the discussion is going towards, because the thing is, here the author is metaphorically speaking about what's going on in the universe. But that question or that type of a question is taking it too literal and saying that how about me controlling and putting mouth and whatnot. So what's the level of conversation in here generally is biologist says DNA with its helix structure is providing life. This is the claim. There's no mouth yet. We are talking about cell. We haven't seen, as if, imagine you are this creature, you haven't seen a human yet. You're this minuscule thing, and you have seen a red blood corpuscle, and this is what we are talking to. At that level, we are saying that, oh, I know how you function. Oh, it's happening because of the DNA, right? And then author is saying that such a, how can we say, localized answer. Localized in the sense that you only have a very small, as if it's knowledge, very small knowledge. In terms of will, there's no will. In terms of power, no power is involved. But what is being done in here is requires so comprehensive knowledge, so comprehensive will, doesn't work. Like simply naming it a name such as DNA or CRISPR or this or that doesn't solve the outcome, the action that is being done. And in general, the main theme of this conversation is similar to how we have been, and this was discussed in the previous weeks as well, just to remind, how Ibrahim alayhi salam was building up his arguments. Just to remind again, after breaking all those idols, he asked people asked actually, saying that what broke our idols? And he pointed to the big idol. He is doing the same thing here. So they came and say, or the, let's say, biologist at the level of now red blood corpuscle comes and says, normally we did it. So those people were saying that, or our gods, or those idols, or whatever they represent, are creating you, bringing rain, this and that. Ibrahim said, okay, is that the case? I am going to show you how it works. Then when they were not there, he breaks all the idols, leaves one of them intact. And when they come and says, what did this to our idols? He just shows the big idol. What does he imply? He is implying that, like this one did, but of course they know that breaking some statues require power, will, wisdom, being able to walk inside the room and whatnot. And the big idol doesn't have any of these. So Ibrahim is implying that what you were so far blind to is this fact. Your creation, you being sustained, you being provided with water, this and that, requires such a comprehensive knowledge, wisdom, love, and everything. And now you're spreading and distributing this to these idols. Same thing is in here. The author is saying that the action that's being done or being manifest at the level of red blood corpuscles requires that comprehensive knowledge, power, wisdom, and everything. But the idol that you introduced me is helix structure of DNA. So come on, like this is, it cannot hold an X, it cannot move inside the room, it cannot do any of these. Therefore, he says, get away. It doesn't work.
So I have like a question, sort of a comment, tying back to Sister Aisha's comment about like what she takes away from the text is we should enter into conversation with things that we see. So my question is, why is it that intuitively we're more prone to accepting some things being done by unconscious or sort of like blind forces, as the text says? So for example, in my 8th grade, my bio teacher taught me that the heart is myogenic, which kind of means like a beats by is myogenic. So basically means like sort of beats by itself. And I accepted that. But if she was tell me like about the cake we talked about, she said this cake is self-appearing, I'd be like, Miss Respectful, you're crazy.
Self what?
Self-appearing. This cake is it just appears out of nowhere. And I'll be like, Miss Respectful, you're crazy. But like I was okay with accepting the idea that the heart is myogenic, it just beats by itself. Like it's not controlled by the brain, the heart beats. So why does our intuition more readily accept some ideas as being controlled by unconscious forces or blind forces?
When did this happen? You said 8th grade. So by the time you come to 8th grade, your intuition was already shaped a lot. Like you cannot make a child of age 4 to say that, oh, just because. They will keep asking why, because there's no intuition of what we call as intuition is there yet. Plus, with the authority of a professor, biology professor was being spoken, and there's this other aspect of accepting whatever the biology professor says is true. If your mother was to say that heart is myogenic at that age, you wouldn't believe, just because you wouldn't believe anything your mother said at that age. There's also that aspect of it. Like Adam, for example, whatever Atik says would be wrong at this age, but whatever Birkan says is going to be more likely to be true than whatever Atik says, just because of the nature of their. So it's not only a matter. I think it's not a matter of intuition at all, because you accept it for at least for these two reasons out there, I think.
You also see heart beating. That's another maybe reason. Like it beats and you see that. And when you see that, you think that you already understood it. You already explained it. This is how explanation works in science generally. But when you demonstrate, you assume that you explain it. Like you take some cells, you put in a culture, and then after 300 generations, they change some functions, and you show it. And when you say that, you see, it happens by itself, you have this tendency to believe because you saw it. So it's like a magic trick again. So if I fly in front of you, right, and then I say that I can fly, you will believe me. You wouldn't question because you're not, let's say, accustomed to question and what's going on, how it is possible, whether he can really fly or not, what requires, what flying requires, what requires, and so on. Why not, you don't have such a habit. Let's be honest. So I guess that's another part of the problem. May I have another thing? Yeah. So I've been thinking about this, the hierarchies, again, going back to Atik's question, what's going on here, whether it has any, sorry. No. That was a sharp thing. Yeah. So anyway, so one example came to my mind is just like I forgot about particles, cells, and so on too much, the technical things, right? Atik and I'm sitting and I'm telling him that I'm the master of the kitchen. Okay, I can control everything in the kitchen, like I'm the master ruler in the kitchen. And he says, but Birkan, like, can you control eggs or cheese or whatever, like the milk, right? I say, of course, like here's egg. I bring it from the kitchen, the refrigerator. I say, you see, like egg was not there before. I put it here. So I control egg. And then I say, I can also control milk, right? You see milk was not there. Now I bring it. And if I want it to be, sweet, I put some sugar in it, and in fact, it becomes sugary, sweet, and so on. And then he's clever, of course. He says, "What are you talking about, Birkan? Like, do you have any power or, the knowledge about the eggs?" He said, "Like, do you even know what's inside the egg?" I said, "No, I can only, move it." So anyway, slowly, step by step, he says, "You cannot control eggs. You cannot control milk, right?" And then I say, "Okay, I cannot control eggs and milk, but I can control cake. I can make a cake, right? I get some eggs, I get some milk, flour, put them together. You see, I can at least create a cake, and I created it in front of you. Don't you see?" Now the upper level, like I used egg, milk, and so on. And it goes like this. And he says, "Birkan, you don't make sense." He explains, as Nurse explains. I say, "Okay, I cannot control cake maybe, but I can at least manage the bakery. Right? I decide when cakes are made, when they come into bakery, and so on. I can manage bakery." It goes like that. And we have this tendency almost everywhere. We say that, okay, maybe we cannot explain or we cannot control how things work, in the universe, but at least we can make the smartphones, our technology, using our technology, our engineering, and so on, we can build cars, right? So from low, it always starts from, bigger, more ambitious claims about ruling the universe, not only as a human being, but also the natural laws governing something. And it always starts from theory of everything, as I said before. And then when we fail, and we always fail, the one example we keep giving is that, "But how about our technology? Right? We can create things." So it goes really in this direction to upper levels.
I think the author is like asking us to in search of God, like look at ourselves and our body, like and see this small particle, the red blood cell, how it works and its amazing function. And we even don't have control over this small particle. So like it do like an amazing job, like it deliver your oxygen to your different cells, and its shape is, it actually is not a cell that is like just this for 3 months and then dies. Another one comes and do that, like, and how when it reaches the cell, it leaves the oxygen, it takes the CO2. When it reaches the lungs, like it takes oxygen and leaves CO2. Like how this work, you have control over this. Like this small particle doing its job like perfectly and always, like all the time, with no like, doesn't like when you sleep, it doesn't like turn down, like, or shut down. It's amazing, like, and we don't control anything. It just happens. And who control this? Like must be someone who's in control, like all the time. Must be someone is responsible. Yeah.
I don't know if it's too relevant, but like, just talking about whether the difference between controlling and being able to enact my will on something. I guess that's where my mind has been going, because it seems, yeah, we can control eating, we can control making cake, build rockets. Somehow we can control physics, it seems. So am I not really controlling a particle when I can build a rocket that can go into space? But But I think that's where kind of that has already been talked about, is if I stop there, right there, then I can be, okay, I make my own little garden. I put some fences around me. I control this area. If I could do that, then maybe I could claim control because I control all the things. But I think what Nursi is kind of pointing to is look at the unity of everything. When you make a rocket that goes to space, it's not just you made this rocket that functions independently of everything. It just goes to space and then it comes back and you've controlled all the particles and all the chemical reactions. No, you exist in this universe. You exist in this existing creation where things function in a certain way, are being made to function in a certain way, and you're utilizing that. You're within that. So to now try to cut a piece of it and say I control it, it's an injustice. And like an example that came to my mind, apparently Meta came out with this new app called Threads. I have not looked into it, I didn't hear it, but only thing I heard about it is apparently 10 engineers made this app. And they're saying, wow, only 10 engineers made this app. That's so amazing. They're like geniuses or something. But then right behind it, they use the infrastructure that has been built by thousands of engineers in Meta already. So if these 10 engineers come out and say, we built it, we made it, we control it, it would be an injustice to all the infrastructure that was built up until that point. They can't claim that they control it. They can't claim that they built it from the scratch, they scaled it. In the same way, when I come out and say I control something, it's an injustice to the pre-existing order that I'm in. I can't really make such a claim.
That's all he has a comment.
I want to jump in. I don't know if this is allowed or appropriate, but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. I think
How dare you?
I think there has to be a better way to put it. Like, maybe I think I was like trying to say something similar in Quran class earlier. Like, maybe not control, right? But like I go back to science labs in high school. Like, you pretty much you exert some sort of control over the things you put together, and then you get a result out of it. I like, of course, I do agree with you, and I agree 100%. That it would be, I don't remember what word you used, but like a disrespect to the order we are already in. But like, isn't there a better word that we can use to like describe our influence on how these things work? Like gas and a match make fire. We didn't make the fire, but we brought the things together. Like, I don't know if anyone has like an answer.
I mean, maybe it depends on what Nursi means by control, and maybe what we mean by control. I think if by control we just mean, Zainab asks her father for some food, and the father gets up and gets food and gives it to Zainab. And then if I come to a conclusion, okay, Zainab controlled her father in the sense that she asked for something and then the father obeyed and then brought the food. If we think of control in just this sense, you ask and then you see that it happens, sure. But if you're telling me that Zainab dominated the father somehow and like made the father against, like the father had no other choice, then I would say that is like true control. Like, that's not just asking. There you actually have control, like you control like the actions of the father. So in my mind, that's how I can kind of distinguish the two. Like, if I make a rocket ship or if I eat food, I am somehow asking for something, or I'm kind of enacting my will, but I can't really take a further step and say I made it to be like this. I took the small step of eating something and somehow it's energy. I don't really know what happened. So in that sense, I'm like Zainab, where I'm like the baby asking and somehow it's given to me. And I think the injustice, like I use the word injustice, it could be another word. I'm sure there's better words, but it would be an injustice for Zainab to say, I control my father.
I guess I got my answer because again, I'm gonna use the same example of like gas and a match. Like you don't control the chemical reaction. Like you can like ask them to work together because you know it'll work, but you don't really control the reaction and everything that happens to make it. So I think that's a good answer.
Jazakallah, she's convinced. Alhamdulillah. So I think that sort of wraps up this part. We can continue reading then. I think you want to continue reading.
I guess I'd read this footnote because we never
Yep,
mentioned it. Okay, the
So
all
before we,
please.
if you don't mind. So there's also this tendency that, or idea that if we assume some simple things being true, then we can build on top of them easily. So, like, if we assume, for instance, the matter exists, if we assume that we have these, the interactions between atoms and so on and so forth, we can easily explain what's going on in cells, let's say. Okay, so why I'm mentioning this is that if you ask, for instance, anyone who claims that they can explain things without God, they would say, we assume some basics, right? We assume this is true. Like, yeah, we cannot control, let's say, the atoms and so on. So we assume that they are true, okay? And we assume that they happen this way. And if we assume that, now we can explain the cells, okay? So it goes in parallel with the text. Okay, we cannot explain how atoms move or particle moves and so on and so forth. But if we assume that they are as they are, we can easily explain cells now. There's this tendency or the idea. And now authors saying that, no, this is not true, even if you are just talking about cells. And if you are talking about the causal relationships, apparent relationship, causal relationships between cells, you will again require all-encompassing knowledge to explain cell, how one cell interact with another cell. Even if you assume that, the lower level things is taken granted, even if you assume that, what you have with a cell, how it interact with other cells and so on, still requires an all-encompassing knowledge. So you still need all-knowing, all-wise, all-seeing, all-hearing creator when you just look at the cell itself as well. So you will see this in many, at least like a famous textbooks. For instance, if it is about the biology, they would say there are some biological constants in universe. And with them, we can explain this. If it is about physics, they would say some physical constants. If we assume them, we can explain the letter and so on. An author says, no, with every step. Even if you forget about, even if you are not claiming anything about the particles or lower level things, higher level things, still just by themselves require all encompassing knowledge, power, and will.
Brother Yusuf has a question.
So, especially if you are coming from a religious background, you would say that, yeah, of course, God controls everything. And when the author, as we have been reading maybe 2 weeks ago, when he said, whomever controls the particle must be the one who controls the galaxies, stars. We would say, yeah, of course, it must be the case. But that, of course, shouldn't be that easily said. This is why author is putting a lot of time writing all these lines. As he says, for the particle said, you need to be controlling the particles that I work with. And I am looking at a particle that I drink in, let's say the water particle, and it's going to work in my body. So as if that water particle is saying that, look, I'm talking about the other particles in Yusuf's body that I'm going to be working together with. There are going to be phosphorus, carbons, whatever. Can you control all of them? Then in one layer above, now we are talking about this red blood corpuscle, which particles are making. And then red blood corpuscle says, well, I am working with cells and this, all different type of cells and organs. Can you control them? Then we will get to cells, organs, human body. Human body will say that, well, I am working within this, let's say, animal kingdom. Animal kingdom will say that we are working with the surface of the earth, which there are plants, this and that. So then you will see that actually the smallest particle is so much connected to everything else. I mean, as if object by object, the author is moving us through the whole creation and showing that relationship so that we do not, with a memorized reflex, say that, yes, God controls everything. He says, no, let's go step by step. Then we will agree that the smallest particle that's moving over here is being moved from here to there with the knowledge of what's going on the other side of the galaxy. This has to be the case. This is why we are spending that time. And I think this is a necessary time to spend. Otherwise, we buy somebody else's answers. It might be most of the time it's a professor's answer. Sometimes if you are in a different environment, it's an imam's answer, but it never is your answer. So this is why we are going through this, moving through that. And this is why in Quran, Creator is giving us examples from creation so that the laboratory of Quran is the creation. So speaker in Quran, which is the Creator, makes us walk through all these creation so that we arrive to those conclusions ourselves.
So I have a question, like, I mean, with this renewed understanding, we do see that, like, at least if I stick to physics and laws of mechanics, so the laws of mechanics don't have the power, they don't actually control what's happening, but it still is a perfect description of what happens. And then obviously we've been doing these tests since the 17th century, and we've never once violated the conditions of the laws of mechanics. So what does the line itself represent then? I mean, yes, I'm not saying the law controls how it happens, but it always behaves in accordance with, it is a pattern that I see. So how do I understand, or what is the significance behind these patterns that I see? Because I am able to manipulate them, and we've built this whole world around us by understanding these patterns. I mean, you did give that example of the Quran, which was written with those different gems and rubies and stuff. But I'm so confused as to how do I, what is my at least intellectual relationship with this patterns that I see around me?
But isn't it important for those laws to exist, because that does allude to an order in the universe? I don't know, if Allah wanted, everything could be quote unquote magic, nothing could make sense and everything would still be working. But I do
just to stop there.
okay.
Because if we say if Allah wanted and whatnot, I mean that type
Right.
of thing is again imagining a creator and speaking from that angle. So let's make sure we are aware of our general mistakes. I mean, that's why I wanted to stop there.
Okay, you're right.
Whoever sits there stops you. You see that there's an order.
Yeah.
But for Zara's question, probably we discussed this before, but I mean, whenever we have a discussion, always everybody's head is spinning with different questions coming from different angles. But for the question that you mentioned, one thing that probably we discussed before was, let's say, the law of Qadir. And you are observing Qadir for 20 years. And you're observing that the guy wakes up at 5 a.m., prays Fajr, then goes out, takes a run, comes back, takes a shower, and moment by moment, so regular. It's so much so regular that you call it the law of Qadir. But the law of Qadr doesn't exist as an entity, really. It is something that you observe because the same person keeps manifesting in the same way. It's not like, I mean, you can imagine that there is some sort of a thing which encapsulates Qadir as a soul and pushes him, and Qadir is this puppet, and then if it's 5 a.m., his eyes are automatically opening. I mean, if you are so imaginative, you can do such a thing, but you know that it's Qadir's will, it's Qadir's power. So there's no such law, really, other than Qadir having this order for himself. But if you say that, what could I take as a lesson from this? It's another issue. But other than that, the way we get used to laws existing in the first place as an external entities, laws as agents doing something, it's we making up or imagining things. Otherwise, nobody's, no external entities pushing Qadir to wake up, pushing Qadir to do the prayer.
He has a comment first.
No, I just wanted to look at through a different angle what we were talking about in Quran class. Like, for example, there is beauty around the world. So can we apply that same thought to laws? That, for example, we see the law that something is working in perfect harmony. And we can say that it is through the creator or the sustainer, for example, just as beauty or mercy, that we say that it is from the creator, the sustainer. Can we say that this law in itself has no power, but it has, like, it's through Allah? Can we make that connection or no? I was just.
I was just gonna say, when I drop this to the ground, right? What do about to do that in 2 minutes? Oh no. What do we observe? What would you say, Dua or Natalia? It falls, right? And then when this falls, what do we describe it as? Gravity. And then when someone asks, why did this fall? We also say gravity. So the description that we give to phenomenon that we observe, we end up taking that description and giving it a explanatory power. So we give names. We can call it the law of physics, the law of mechanics, right? We can call it gravity. But at the end of the day, it's names. And we give those names explanatory power. But it's just a description, that it's just a name, a title to a series of events that we observed, that we keep observing. But that constant observation of it never makes certain that it's going to necessarily be that way. I can observe this 500 times and 500 times it will fall. But that won't guarantee that in the 501st, 502nd time, it'll do the same thing. I can trust on that because I can say this is the order I've observed thus far. But there's no necessary relationship between me doing this and this problem. Might be between me doing this and the neighbors saying something though. But so I just wanted to draw our attention to the sort of explanatory power that we give to pure description or to pure names that we also make up in turn.
Comment? Yes, you raise your hand after Kadir's question, but then we can go to Bitcoin if you don't have anything to say.
So going back to your question, but we do see such an order or law, and what does it tell us? This is how I take it, which goes to what Yusuf said, what should I understand from it? I guess this is the important part. So this example we gave before, a child, it was another version, so this is a kind of a new example. Bushra comes and asks water, and every time she asks water, I give her water. Every time, no exception, let's assume. Sometimes I have that. Yeah, let's assume this is true, no exception. And because you are part of this circle, you would say, yeah, of course, Bushra doesn't have any control over me giving her power, the water or so on. But still, there is this pattern. What should I understand from it? And the answer is the mercy of the Father. Whenever she needs something, Father gives her what she needs. The mercy is the answer here, right? The same way, when we look at the universe, whatever we see there, we usually take it in the on surface level. Things moves, things comes from here, goes to there, and we take it as like this is the order, we say, right? The way they move. So in our example, for instance, the order, you would say with your naturalistic mind, you would say the law is when the sound waves has such a pitch and such a, the speed coming from her, like, Father, give me water. So, okay. So you describe the sound waves. You say, when we have such sound waves moving in such direction, the water molecules, forms from somewhere and then moves towards this direction. We describe it as such a law. But in reality, the law is the mercy. That's the real law. So that's the reason this in different places, author talks about laws, he talks about laws of rububiyah, meaning the God, creator, sustainer, educator, providing something. This is the law. So when you look at the so-called laws of mechanics or whatever, this is just a surface level description of what happens. If there's such an order, look deeper. Try to see what it tells you. And you will definitely find something about mercy, something about, the knowledge, something about wisdom, something that wants you to follow a certain path. This is the real law being present there. But again, because we, as author says in another place, our mind, how would you translate it? Aklı gözüne düşmüş. The minds fall into eyes, reduced to the eyes. So this is what we are. We describe things as what we see. But when you put your entire humanity into the equation, you will come up with, from the same regularities, you will come up with another law. And that will be the important one for you.
Jazakallah khair. That was a lovely comment. That reminded me of a verse from Suriname which says, to whom belongs what is in the heavens and the earth, say to Allah, and He has ordained mercy on Himself. So, and we see of mercy. So, Jazakallah khair. That's beautiful.
I also thought that was very beautiful. And mercy also made me think of how, like the fact that we even have order, if we think of it from like a human perspective, that is very merciful, because if we didn't have order and everything descended into chaos, like we'd be very disturbed. So yeah, just that.
Brother Yusuf has a comment.
Just to comment for Kadir's question. So during the Quran class, we were talking about a rose being manifestation of creator in like beauty is being manifested in a rose, but whose beauty is that? Where is this coming from? What is the originator of the beauty? So we were saying that a rose is a medium of a, if you like, a passage, like a pipe through which beauty is passing. And as it passes, you observe it through the rose. When it comes to law, externally, such a thing does not exist, but in your perception, such a thing exists. You keep seeing the same pattern. In your perception, you say that gravity exists, or at least on you, such an idea is being created. Then Kadir's question in this sense is, can we apply the same thing that we apply to the rose for the law in this case? Then yes, law becomes the manifestation of order the orderer. You know the orderer through observing, through knowing the concept of law in your understanding. Otherwise, I mean, there's no tangible law out there anywhere. It is the tangible thing you observe is sun is rising every day. But the law is being created in you, the understanding, which points to the wisdom, order, and also the all-encompassing aspect of all these. So yes.
Is it okay if I make a comment? Zareen? Hello?
So, I have a question, which is slightly deviating from the topic, but I think it's important to ask. So Dua was talking about, she said something like, if Allah wanted, and Dr. Yusuf interrupted her and said that you kind of have the wrong idea, because you're thinking of God as like an object or a person or something that we can imagine, is what I got from it, at least. And I think that makes sense. I mean, for the creator of the universe, I think it's fairly reasonable to say that it's probably someone that's pretty much impossible for us to imagine. But I think at the same time, it's very hard to talk about a creator without, having some sort of mental model or image in your head. Or how do you basically want us to think about God in our heads, if not, some sort of object? What would be the right way to go about it in your opinion? And I mean, I'm looking at Dr. Yusuf, but obviously anyone's open to answer whatever they want to say.
So, yeah, so, I mean, this is a recurring theme in the discussions. So when you're born, there's no creator for you. You only have milk, you only have water, and your needs, right? So the idea of a creator, a source for all the things you see, is building on top of what? Building on top of your needs and those needs being fulfilled. So this is why the creator is a conclusion. Creator is not where you start from. Creator, understanding of a creator is how you end your search. So when we say, oh, God does this, God does that, we are starting the journey, the conversation from the creator. What the creator is, if I cannot come up with any explanation for where the milk was coming from, why I was hungry, why little Ali is hungry, for example. If I cannot explain it with anything else, if I cannot find the source where the water is coming from, where the milk is coming from, where the mercy is coming from, not only that, whomever is giving the milk is also giving must be also be giving the mercy, must be also giving me the life and everything. So the source needs to be universal. Universal meaning, as now we are studying, whomever is controlling the smallest must be controlling everything else. This is why we say such a thing does not exist within this universe. Therefore, such a being must exist, but that being is not here. I mean, the God is nothing like this. Therefore, how do I know about creator is your question. I get to know the creator through creation. What I mean by that is, and I'm summarizing hours and hours of discussion in a few sentences, so it's being a little too much loaded. So when I talk about even, let's give a simpler example, your mother's mercy. Have you ever seen your mother's mercy? No. Mercy is not a visible thing per se, but you get to know that your mother is merciful, and you say that your mother is merciful. Why? Because you were treated with mercy by your mother. So when you say my mother is merciful, you mean I was provided with milk in the middle of night. I asked for water in the middle of night and I was brought water. And then you can even say, based on that, if I want, I don't know, such a thing, which I've never asked from my mother, I know she will give it to me, right? This is how you know mercy of your mother, based on your experience with your mother, how she manifested her mercy on you. And for the things that she didn't manifest yet, you're extrapolating. But it's again based on your relationship with her. You're not imagining anything of unknown or anything. This is why when we talk about the creator, I should say what we mean by God. God is the one, must be the one who is pumping my blood heart right now, who is providing me with the air right now. This is why I call him merciful. This is why I call him provider. Then I say, well, I also need eternal life. I don't want to die. And even that need, that desire is put to me by him, but I haven't died and resurrected yet. This is not something that I experienced yet, right? But I can say, based on my experience with him, I am pretty sure, pretty convinced that he would not let me sleep in the grave forever. He would resurrect me because he put that need in me. And he even put the need to my stomach for food, and he keeps providing the need of that little stomach, right? Every day he creates me food and fruits and water and everything. That small need is being provided every day. What is the biggest need of human? I want eternal life. I don't want death. I cannot accept that. And even that need of eternal life was put by him. Therefore, I say the one who fulfilled this stomach for the past 38 years, I am pretty sure he will provide the bigger need, the giant need of my humanity, which is eternal life. Therefore, I say there must exist an afterlife. How did I say this? I mean, you see the difference between the two. I am not saying that, oh, God is powerful. He would definitely, he has the power to create the eternal life to me and whatnot. I didn't go by imagining a God. No. Based on my experience here, I say that I know him as a merciful creator, and it's based on experience, not imagination. And I'm not imagining scale of his knowledge or anything of that sort. What I say, again, based on my need and how he treated me so far, I am sure he will treat me like this for my eternal needs. So it's a different approach. I'm not imagining the creator, but it is starting from me, from my needs and how he treats me, or let me put it this way, how I am being treated. Then I say the same one who treats me as such would treat me. I would expect him to treat me like this, if that makes sense. I mean, it's a longer conversation. The same theme would keep appearing again and again. So if it's not obviously clear right now, that's totally understandable, because probably it's a quite different of an approach than what we generally are used to. But this approach is how Quran is teaching us. When Quran says La ilaha illallah, this is what it is actually. What I just said in 5-10 minutes is summarized in a single sentence in Quran, which is La ilaha illallah. What does that mean? It says, it starts with a negation. It doesn't start with Allah, right? It doesn't say, actually in Turkish, the Turkish translation of La ilaha illallah starts with Allah. Quran is using it as no, there is no God but God. It's not saying Allah is the one other than whom there is no God. It's not like this. It says there is no God but God, which means I do see something here. It was not here before. So it needs a maker. Like think about our little Ali. Last week he was younger than what he is right now. So he changed. So somebody must have changed him, right? There's this constant and meaningful change in the creation, in the existence. The question is who made this? Quran's approach is, don't give me a memorized answer. Try. His mother raised him. Can it be? Does his mother know what has changed in him, which cells got replaced, how his face has changed and whatnot? We have no clue. We don't know what's going on really. Somebody else is growing that kid. Was it the potato soup that we gave him? We need to ask all these questions. Actually, this is what we are doing right now. Once we negate, oh, it cannot be the mother, it cannot be the potato soup, it cannot be the water and this and that. La ilaha illa, la ilaha, la ilaha. So we are negating them as potential gods, potential doers. Then we say, well, nothing is left. Nothing in this universe can be the doer. Then what? Still there has to be a doer, because there's an action, there has to be a doer. Then we say the doer must exist, but the doer is not of type of anything in here. Therefore, illa Allah. So this is why Allah is conclusion. It's not, and we are not going to start and talk from here. We will always start from our experiences. But inshallah, as we study the discussions, that approach is going to become more clear, inshallah.
Thank you.
Maybe we can emphasize that, like Yusuf said, this is so different. This is so different, but this is only different than what we used to. Otherwise, this is not something new. This is exactly how Quran describes what we should be doing. And like maybe one example would be, so if I to ask you, you know, do you know Leonardo? Which one are you thinking? No, Da Vinci, of course. Which one you thought?
I thought Da Vinci.
Okay, great. So I ask you, do you know the Leonardo, not the DiCaprio, but Da Vinci? You would say yes or no?
Yeah.
How do you know him?
The Mona Lisa.
Mona Lisa, read about him, and so on. You know him through what? His works. This is how you know him. So if you were, you just come to me and start talking about Leonardo da Vinci, in a way that as if, you know him from first hand as a person and so on, the way you speak wouldn't make sense, right? Like I would say, what are you talking about? Like if you want to say something about Leonardo da Vinci, talk about his works, and from his works we conclude something about him. So if you say, for instance, because Leonardo is genius, he could do this. If you tell me that, I would say, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean because Leonardo is genius? Genius means many things. What do you mean exactly? So you would say the one who can build a helicopter in, I don't know what century, 17th? I don't know. The one who can build a helicopter in, let's say, 17th centuries can definitely do this. If you put in such a form, then I would say, yes, now I understand what you mean, right? And this is exactly what Quran asks us to do. Quran tells us to know Creator through what? Names. And when we look at the names, we will say that they all refer to something happening in the universe, something happening in our existence. The one who creates death, the one who creates life, the one who knows, the one who sees, the one who brings rain down. This is the Quranic approach. So we look at the creation, we look at the rain, and I say, the one who brings water, rain, from above, so that all these plants and also me will be nourished, will definitely do this or that. If I say that, you will be convinced. And Quran wants us to think of this way. Look at the the work, the action, the art, and then conclude about the artist. This is how Quran wants us. If I come and tell you that I'm a great cook, you just say that, okay, that's all. Do you know anything about my, being a cook? No, you just have a blind faith in me, which is not iman, just a blind faith. But if I bring some food in front of you, you would say, yeah, okay, he's a good cook or bad cook, maybe. If I go further, if I make the food in front of you, then your iman will be even higher. So this is the Quranic approach when it comes to iman. So iman in creator, belief in creator, it's not that, we believe in Allah because we are Muslims. This is not Quranic approach. You cannot find anything in Quran like that. But Quran says your belief in God means you look at the universe, you look at the rain, and you see that, as Yusuf said, La ilaha illallah, it must be someone with this or with that. Other than that, cannot create this rain. When you're convinced, you have a level of understanding. And then when you study more and more, and when I say study more, it's not like a scientific exploration. I'm just meaning like what it means to you as a human exploration. Your iman will increase. Start from the action, start from the artwork, and talk about the artist. Like we keep saying this several times, like I will say it again. The word Allah, the word, it's just a proper name. It's like Birkan. By itself, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a proper name. If I tell you that, oh, John, he did this. Did you understand anything? No, right? What John? Who is John? The same way, when I say Allah, it's just a proper name, like John. There are some discussions on, the etymology of the word Allah and so on and so forth. They are just discussions, scholarly discussions. But the word is just a proper name. It doesn't mean anything. So that's the reason when Quran uses Allah, it usually follows by a description. Allahu la ilaha illa. And this is the first thing comes after Allah. So if you want to know Allah, He is the one, la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illa huwa. This is Allah. So this is how you know Allah. Look at the false idols, eliminate them. What is rest? Allah. So this is the first description. Wallahu allazi la ilaha illahu alimul ghaibi shahada. The description continues. So when you look at the universe, if you see that there must be someone who knows about things, now your understanding about Allah is increasing. Otherwise, it's just an empty proper name, John, which doesn't mean anything. Or Atik, doesn't mean anything. When you feel in the name with the artwork, what you experience, then you have an understanding of Allah. You never start from Allah, because again, it will be an empty John.